After teaching private guitar lessons for a little over 16 years, I've made the switch to teaching my very own curriculum inside of my guitar program. And I'm making this video to explain a little bit about why I've made that switch. First and foremost, students in my guitar program are able to make so much more progress than my students in private lessons. And this has to do with a lot of different factors. In private lessons, I would come up with an individualized plan for each student. So each student had their own individualized goal and their own individualized roadmap on how to get there. With the guitar program, most of the students have their own reason why they want to learn the fretboard and learn music theory and achieve fretboard fluency. So they have their own kind of personal application, but the goal is the same. All of the students have the same goal of understanding the fretboard, understanding music theory, having that confidence of expressing themselves on the fretboard. So since they all have the same goal, we get to utilize the same plan, the same curriculum. Whereas before, with private lessons, everyone had their own goal, everyone had their own plan, which meant that during the private lesson time itself, most of the private lesson time was spent with me coming up with their own individualized curriculum. So I would usually have around 30 students at a time, which meant that I was creating 30 different curriculums for 30 different students, which now I leverage and utilize the one curriculum for all the students in my guitar program. So there's lots of kind of secondary and I think the word is tertiary effects of that change. The biggest being is that students in my program, they get to benefit from the fact that the curriculum is already created. So day one in the guitar program, students get access to the curriculum and they can start digging into it. They can dig into it during the middle of the week. They can dig into it and ask me questions about it. Like there's no reason for them to wait for anything. Whereas with private lessons, students would have to wait for the actual lesson itself, and then I would create as much of the curriculum as I could during that guitar lesson, and then they would take that home, and that's all they had. And they would have the concepts of what to work on, but I found that a lot of students, in addition to the actual concepts, need help figuring out specifically what to practice. In my guitar program, I've laid that out. Like here's literally what you practice every single day, right? That's already written in the curriculum available to my students in the program. But with private lessons, there's not time to like in a half-hour lesson, you can't sit down and be like, okay, here's the goal for this week. Here's literally what you practice every single day. And here's 7 sheets of what to practice at. Like, there's just not enough time. And then I got into the zone, just personally, I got into the zone where I was trying to prepare for each lesson so that I could do some work before the lesson and show up prepared with a little more material for each student. And there was just literally not enough time in the week. I couldn't keep up with it. It was way too much work. So that's the one thing, is the actual material itself. And what that has led to is that students in my guitar program can make the same progress in just a couple months that it used to take my students years in private lessons to be able to make. Just simply from having access to the curriculum already. I didn't need to create it from scratch. The students didn't need to wait for it at all. It was just already there. So now my interactions with students are answering questions and helping them with their own personal application of the curriculum. rather than having to create the curriculum out of thin air or something like that. Before, with private lessons, I could teach basically any student almost any concept. Now, with the guitar program, it's not for everybody. It's for a very specific kind of guitar student who wants to be able to express their own ideas and improvise, and who really enjoys understanding the why of why the guitar works and why music works the way that it does. So I can't serve as many different types of students in the guitar program as I could before with private lessons, but the students who are a good fit for my guitar program, they get so much more out of it. And that makes me really happy. I would rather be able to help less people, but a whole lot more, and a whole lot more deeply and significantly, rather than be able to help more kinds of people in a more shallow way. So that's the biggest reason I made the switch from teaching one-on-one lessons to teaching my curriculum in the guitar program, is that students make a whole lot more progress. Another thing that's been really amazing is that my students now have a community. We have group calls. We have an online space where we can chat with one another and keep up with one another during the middle of the week. And students really appreciate being in a community of other like-minded guitarists who are all studying the same thing together. A lot of times, another student will ask a question that they themselves hadn't thought to ask, which is really helpful, as well as just hearing other people expressing the difficulties that they're having, letting you realize, oh, I'm not the only one feeling that way. Super, super helpful. Also, students will learn a whole lot from one another in addition to just learning from me. So I can say something, and you might take it one way because I'm the creator and the leader of the program. But if another student kind of says the same thing, but with their own kind of personality on it, the fact that it's coming from another student who's in the same position that you are in, a lot of people find that really, really helpful. So just having that community together has been super valuable for the students in the program. When I was teaching one-on-one guitar lessons, sometimes I'd do like a recital or something, and then people would be able to hear each other play, and that's fine. But more or less, my private students, they didn't really have a lot in common. So it didn't really make sense to like have a community. I would have adults, I would have kids, I would have people learning metal, I would have people learning jazz and flamenco and classical and different reasons why they were wanting to study the guitar. Whereas in my guitar program, everyone has a lot more in common. It's basically just adults. Like I mentioned before, everyone's really interested in understanding the why of things, so we're all a little nerdy, and we all care a lot. The guitar is something that is important to us. It's not the way that students in the program are trying to make a living or make a career out of it, but it's a real passion. It's not something that they just feel casually about. It's something that they're committed to. And the fact that the students in the program kind of have that in common, it makes a lot of sense to have a community around it so that we can support one another and learn from one another. So that's a really amazing switch that has happened from teaching private lessons to teaching my guitar program, is that students now actually have a community with one another. And the other reason why I've switched from teaching private lessons to teaching my curriculum in my guitar program is that every student who graduates the guitar program makes the program and the curriculum better. Because the more that I teach this same curriculum in this same program, the better that I get at teaching it, and the more that I start to understand ways to improve the program, but also ways to improve the program for specific personalities, which has been very, very interesting. That's kind of what it's been for the past 6 or 7 months, is that I haven't needed to make any big changes to the program itself. Also, there's a helicopter flying around at 6:30 in the morning, which is kind of crazy. But if you can hear the helicopter, that's what it is. Let's see. Let me get my brain back on track here. For the past 6 or 7 months, I haven't needed to change anything significant about the program. It's just kind of small little tweaks to make the program that much more accessible for different kinds of personalities, which has been really interesting to me. It's affirming that the curriculum is really great, because it more or less just works for everybody who I've allowed into the program. And I think I also do a pretty good job at making sure that I'm only allowing people into the program that I'm confident that I can help. So that plays a role in it too. But it's really exciting to me that every student who goes through the program makes the program better. So the longer that I teach this curriculum and the longer that I run the program, the better and better the curriculum and the program are becoming, which is only going to make it that much better for future students of the program. So it's this virtuous cycle of the more that I teach it, the more students who get involved in the program, the better it gets, and the more helpful it will be for future students, which is really, really exciting for me to be a part of. Whereas before, with my private lessons, I was teaching 30 different curriculums to 30 different kinds of students, where sometimes there would be the case where I'd be able to take a lesson from one student and kind of give it to another student, but it wouldn't happen it wouldn't happen frequently enough to really make a significant impact on making those lessons better. It made a significant impact on making me better as an instructor and the skill set of being able to teach people and come up with curriculums. But I wasn't really kind of like working on a project that was getting better. So being able to work on this project of the curriculum and the program has been a really, really wonderful challenge. And I don't mean that in like, oh man, it's so hard. I mean that in the exciting, like it's an exciting challenge for me to sink my teeth into as an instructor. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful change. Like I mentioned before, because teaching guitar lessons is basically like the only job I've ever had. Teaching guitar lessons and playing guitar, of course. So yeah, making that switch from teaching the one-on-one lessons to now teaching my curriculum in the program, it's been awesome for my students in terms of helping them make progress. They make so much more progress now. It's been wonderful because now my students have a community, and then also because the more students who get involved, the better it becomes, which means it's going to be better for future students as well. I think there's lots more reasons that I could dive into, but I think that's probably good for one video. So thank you so much for hanging out. It's great to see you this morning. Hopefully whoever's up there in the helicopter is able to find what they're looking for. But yeah, I will see you in the next video.